What's a group of chubby newborns called? Heavy infantry. The film opens with Jim Terrier and his buddies hanging out in a bar in Congo City, engaging in conversation and enjoying drinks. Suddenly, the television broadcasts a report about various mining companies ending their agreements with the Democratic Republic of the Congo because of increasing corruption. Jim and his girlfriend, Annie, are shown waking up in a house. Annie has to head out to her job. He tries to convince her to stay a little longer, but she has to leave due to her busy schedule at work. The next scene shows Jim on patrol with his team. He spots two vehicles approaching across a field. These vehicles belong to Felix and his team from Cox. Jim senses something is wrong as he observes them through his binoculars. He then orders his team to start their mission. Felix goes to a hospital to see Annie, who is attending to her patients. He offers to take her home, but she declines, saying Jim will be picking her up. Felix appears to be quite fond of Annie. We then see Jim and his team in a car, making plans to assassinate a minister. A team member inquires about their exit plan, and their leader explains that Felix has arranged everything, and they will escape by plane. Jim is then shown setting up his sniper rifle at a window in a luxury hotel. Looking a bit anxious, he asks Felix to keep an eye on Annie in case the operation doesn't work out while talking to his team. Felix reassures him that he will take very good care of Annie. Jim, armed with his rifle, is seen at the window as a convoy carrying the minister approaches. When his teammate confirms the minister is in the left side of one of the cars, Jim loads his rifle and shoots, killing the minister. He then departs from the location. The scene shifts to news being broadcast on various TV channels about riots erupting again in the country. 8 years later, we see Jim enjoying surfing on a beach. He's discussing with his coworkers about the recent developments and changes in their line of work. He has been working in this new job for nearly a year. In the next scene, Jim is on a tour of the area with his team and his assistant Eugene, checking out recent developments in the vicinity. They stop their car to take a closer look at a situation unfolding in a nearby village. Jim encounters difficulties while trying to repair a machine that malfunctions during use. Suddenly, cars filled with armed criminals arrive in the village, looking for Jim. One of the thugs attacks Jim's team as soon as they are spotted. Jim, a skilled ex-mercenary, eliminates all the attackers with Eugene's help. After the confrontation, Jim checks on Eugene's condition and expresses his gratitude, saying, "I'll always remember this." He instructs Eugene to go into the compound, ensure the safety of all workers there, and lock it down until further orders. Jim then drives away in his car, appearing somewhat dazed. When Jim gets home later, he is visibly unsettled and experiences flashbacks of the time he assassinated the minister. Following this, we see Jim on a plane, pondering over the recent events and jotting down some notes on a piece of paper. He then heads straight to London, where he is seen crossing a bridge. In London, Jim enters an apartment and opens a black packet taken from a safe, examining some confidential documents inside. He meets his friend Terry and tells him about his move to London from Congo, inquiring who else knew about Project Calvary. Jim shares that 3 men came to Congo specifically to kill him. Terry reveals that the project was known only to a few, the clients, Jim, Bryson, Terry himself, all considered as brothers, and Felix, who had direct contact with the client. Terry mentions that Felix was last in Barcelona and suggests they meet him to figure out who's behind the recent turmoil. Jim also warns Terry to be cautious because they might also target him. After leaving the building, Jim is under surveillance. He goes to a bar and meets Stan, a colleague from his team, while some onlookers keep an eye on him. Stan suggests to Jim that the whole situation might be a misunderstanding, but Jim is convinced that someone is after him and is determined to find out who it is. In the bar, when some intoxicated patrons behave rudely towards Stan, Jim ends up beating one of them severely, and then he and Stan quickly leave the place. Jim passes out as they exit the bar, and Stan assists him. In the next scene, Jim is in a hospital undergoing a brain scan. His doctor tells him that he has brain damage, his brain isn't functioning properly, and he can't handle any kind of stress anymore. Jim informs his friend that he needs to go to Barcelona to find a safe house. Initially, Stan is hesitant, but Jim convinces him, and Stan agrees to help. Stan advises Jim to connect with some contacts in Barcelona who can aid him in his mission. Upon arriving at a hotel in Barcelona, Jim finds everything he needs, including a firearm and documents. Jim begins to keep an eye on Felix, and upon noticing that Annie is with him, starts to follow her. Jim then shows up at a press conference where Felix is speaking. He interrupts Felix mid-speech, making Felix visibly uncomfortable. Later, in a private meeting, Felix confronts Jim, who reveals that he was the target of an assassination attempt in Congo, which shocks Felix. Felix then threatens Jim, implying a misunderstanding if Jim thinks he can take Annie away. Following this, Jim is seen entering a restaurant where he joins Felix and Annie for dinner. Annie becomes visibly emotional and uneasy when she sees Jim there with Felix. During their conversation, Felix behaves inappropriately towards both her and Jim, leading Jim to push Felix. After Annie departs, Jim goes after her. He tries to apologize and explain things to her, but she's too upset and walks away. Later, Jim is taking a bath in his apartment when he hears a knock at the door. Cautiously, he grabs his gun and checks, only to find it's Annie. She questions why Jim is there, and he shares the entire backstory with her. Annie then suggests they meet for lunch the next day, mentioning Felix has some important information. Jim arrives at Felix's large house, and noticing Annie isn't there. Felix informs him that she's out horse riding. Felix then reveals that 2 out of the 3 people connected to the assassination are dead, leaving him as the sole remaining target. Jim senses something is amiss and tells Felix he feels the whole team is converging on their location. Felix excuses himself to the bathroom, and Jim takes the opportunity to check Felix's phone. He discovers Felix has been leaking information about him. Jim confronts and overpowers Felix, warning Annie that they are all in danger. As armed attackers begin shooting from outside, Jim tries to protect Felix, but one of the gunmen shoots, resulting in Felix's death. Jim quickly informs Annie of Felix's demise and insists they need to leave immediately. They take refuge in the basement, where Jim uses a knife to eliminate an attacker who comes after them. He prepares himself by gathering his gun, ammunition, and putting on a bulletproof vest. The couple then hides in a bathroom, where a fierce gunfight ensues. Jim, an expert assassin, manages to overpower all the assailants, commandeers a car, and escapes with Annie. They stop to switch cars, and Annie demands to know everything: who these people are and what's happening. Jim then reveals that he was part of a team deployed under the guise of providing security for local projects, with their actual mission being to assassinate the minister. Jim offers an apology to Annie, and they leave the area. Arriving at his apartment, Jim instructs Annie to keep the car running and to leave if he doesn't return within 15 minutes. He sneaks into his apartment using a back entrance and discovers a bomb planted there. Realizing that people in the neighboring apartment are monitoring his place, he defuses the bomb and leaves. Jim then strategically places the same bomb near the main entrance, re-enters through the front door, and watches from a window to see if anyone is coming. As an assailant opens the main gate, the bomb detonates, allowing Jim and Annie to escape. Jim informs her they will seek help from a friend. They visit Stan, enjoy a meal, and spend some time there. After Annie falls asleep, Jim prepares to leave, asking Stan to take Annie to the police if he doesn't return. The scene then shifts to Gibraltar, where Jim arrives. His friend speculates that Terry might be involved in everything, noting that everyone connected to their mission is now dead. Jim then starts a conversation with an unknown individual outside the Interpol office. After a while, this person hands Jim a card, which turns out to be an Interpol ID. Soon after, Terry and his team appear, and Jim spots them. He calls Terry, leaving a message to meet at a theme park, where they eventually rendezvous. Jim, feeling suspicious, pulls Terry aside for a private conversation. Just as Terry is about to inject him, Jim overpowers Terry. Jim confronts Terry about his betrayal, to which Terry admits they had to eliminate everyone to avoid risks. As they talk, Jim's health starts to fail, and he feels dizzy. He shows Terry a document, claiming to have all the necessary evidence. Terry dismisses its importance, leading Jim to shoot him. As Jim is about to finish Terry off, Terry pleads for forgiveness, claiming he had no other choice. Suddenly, gunmen open fire on Jim, and Terry escapes. Despite the gunman's efforts to take Jim down, he manages to text Stan for help before losing consciousness. Jim quickly leaves and contacts Terry as soon as he understands the situation. As Terry picks up the phone, saying, "I was expecting your call, talk to your friend Stan," it becomes apparent that Annie and Stan are now under Terry's control. When Jim tries to communicate with Stan, Stan asks Jim to end his life as a favor. This request angers Terry, and he ends up shooting Stan. Jim is overcome with a sense of powerlessness as Terry threatens Annie's life. Jim proposes they meet in a crowded place, which confuses Terry. To persuade Terry, Jim sends him a video showing Terry directing the assassination. Alarmed by the video, Terry agrees to the public meeting. Jim then instructs Terry to let Annie go on her own, promising to bring the notebook and all the evidence to him. Terry, following Jim's instructions, arrives at a stadium with his team and Annie. Jim skillfully eliminates each of Terry's gunmen one by one. However, during the confrontation, Jim is shot by a second gunman and has to retreat to a room for first aid. As the third gunman reports to Terry that both gunmen are dead, Terry emerges with Annie. Meanwhile, Annie manages to escape from Terry. An intense fight ensues between Jim and the third gunman, where they both sustain multiple stab wounds, but ultimately, Jim kills the third gunman. Severely injured, Jim uses a rope to call Annie to him. As Terry cautiously approaches from behind, threatening Annie, Jim shoots him, allowing Annie to climb up to safety. Then, as Jim and Annie reunite, a bull hits and kills Terry. Jim contacts the unidentified man who gave him the Interpol card, handing over all the evidence and taking them both into custody just as Interpol arrive. In the hospital, Jim speaks with the Interpol agent, agreeing to collaborate to uncover all the details. The next scene on a TV channel announces that all involved in the operation have been arrested. The final scene shows Annie engaged in social work in a village, helping the underprivileged. She is surprised and relieved to see Jim, who has completed his sentence, and they share a heartfelt reunion. If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy to hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice, just to be sure. It would be best if you watched the whole movie. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe for more videos like this.